So let's have a look at our problem with computing the French Revolutionary or decimal time. As always, I like to start out with a little sketch. So if we think of our clock starting at midnight, going to noon, and then one has to go one more time around, which is actually quite dumb if you think about it, to get to midnight again. Well, the French revolutionaries had a better idea. They said, well, we'll start at 0 and then we'll go around once, and that makes 10 hours. Let's unroll these circular things into a line. So for the traditional time, it starts at 0 and goes to 24 by 60 or 1,440 minutes for the day. The French Revolutionary timeline also starts at 0 and goes to 1,000 minutes. So now you can see that if you want to compute the decimal minutes, you take the regular minutes and you scale by 1,000 over 1,440, where of course here I do mean the minutes from midnight. So the key is to compute everything in minutes from midnight, and then the math is pretty easy. How do you then get the actual decimal minutes and decimal hours? You just divide by 100 and you mod by 100. So let's look at the code. We have a code. First off, we want to write the constructor where we get a string such as 11:30, and then we need to take it apart into the hours and minutes. The way I've done it is I've extracted two substrings and converted each of them into an integer. I've seen some of you convert the entire string into an integer and then use division and remainder operators to get the hours and minutes. That's of course just fine too. So over here I have the hour and minute. These are instance variables, so I will hang on to those for the life of the object. And then I also want to compute the decimal minutes from midnight. So we've seen that formula where for the decimal minute I have to take the minutes from midnight times 1,000 over 1,440. Now the minutes here are the minutes from midnight, so I first need to compute those, which I'm doing over here. So I'm taking the hour, in my case that was 11, multiply by 60 and add the minutes, and that would give me the minutes from midnight, and then I'll convert them, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. No pun intended. Over here though, what I wanted to point out is the minutes per hour. I didn't write 60, but I wrote a named constant that is defined up here. Alright, now let's move on to the hard part. How do I turn the minutes into the decimal minutes? So I have to multiply by 1,000 over 1440. Again, those ones here I'm computing down here, and I want to really make explicit where those numbers come from, so I'm using the named constants that you see up here. For example, the numerator decimal hours per day is 10, decimal minutes per hour is 100, and they multiply to the 1,000 that we want here. Alright, now there is a couple of issues. One is I have to make sure that all of this arithmetic happens in floating point and not in integer arithmetic, because if you computed, for example, 1,000 over 1,440 in integer arithmetic, that would just be 0. And the trick that I use here, and there are more than one way of doing it, but I think this one is easy to understand, is to simply multiply with 1.0. That turns the computation in a floating point. And finally, I use the round method to get the round up or down to the nearest integer. At this point, decimal minute from midnight is an integer. I've stored it as an instance variable, and I can use it in the other methods. So the other methods are really quite simple. Over here, you'll see get hour, get minute are just regular accessors that return the instance variables. And to get the decimal hour and decimal minute, I take this quantity that I've computed the decimal minutes from midnight and either divide or take the remainder by 100. And that's all.